You step off the trolley and into the heart of Boston's North End, just as the first light of morning spills over the cobblestones. The air hits you thick, sticky, almost edible. It's not the crisp winter scent you'd expect for a January morning. No, this is something different. Something richer, sweeter. The scent of molasses swarm, dark and faintly intoxicating, hangs in the air like an invisible fog. You wouldn't know it by looking around, but this neighborhood is a major artery in America's industrial bloodstream. Children chase one another down the icy sidewalks, past brick tenements and gas lamps, kicking up slush with their laughter. Mothers scrub laundry inside cramped apartments. Workmen smoke cigarettes with calloused fingers, their boots tracking grime from the docks. And above it all, looming like a titan among men, stands a steel tank. It's monstrous 50 feet high, 90 feet wide, and filled nearly to the brim with more than 2 million gallons of molasses. You squint up at it, watching a flock of pigeons circle its dome before settling on the top, unfazed. The tank isn't beautiful. In fact, it's rust-streaked and patched like a wounded soldier. But in this neighborhood, it's a symbol of modernity, of industry, of progress. No one questions the tank anymore. It's just part of the scenery, like the bakery 2 doors down or the Italian grocer on the corner who sells salami from behind a counter made of scrap wood. The children even smear their fingers along the riveted steel, licking the sticky residue off their hands like it's candy. You don't know it yet, but that tank is a time bomb. Just a few blocks away, the Purity Distilling Company counts its profits. They don't see molasses as a foodstuff or a treat. They see fuel, money, potential. From this tank, molasses flows to distilleries where it's turned into alcohol rum, mostly, and industrial ethanol used for munitions. It's the tail end of the First World War. The demand for alcohol has never been higher. And so the tank stays full, always, constantly refilled even when it groans, even when the steel panels bulge outward slightly on warm days. The neighbors have noticed the noises. Some say it creaks. Others say it weeps. Leaks appear, slow drips that children scoop into tin cans for their mothers. But the company assures everyone there's no danger. And besides, who's going to question the men in suits when everyone else is just trying to survive? You pass by the tank again later in the afternoon. The sun is lower now, and the cold has sharpened. You can see the steel shivering just a little, but you tell yourself it must be the wind. Maybe it's always been like that. You've just never paid enough attention. You stop into a bakery near the waterfront. The woman behind the counter hands you a loaf wrapped in paper and tells you in a thick accent that the tank leaked again this morning. You both laugh. "Molasses tank's sweeter than my husband," she jokes. But her eyes linger a little longer on the window. Out there, the tank looms in shadow, blotting out part of the setting sun. And now, as twilight falls, the scent thickens again. A molasses fog settles over the rooftops like a strange omen. You're heading home, past the horses and the shopkeepers locking their doors, when you hear a distant creak metal on metal, like a ship turning in a tight harbor. You pause. No one else seems to notice. A boy tugs at your coat, begging for a nickel, and you forget about the sound. For now. But in just 24 hours, that tank will explode. You don't know it yet, but you're walking through the calm before one of the strangest and deadliest disasters in American history. One that will drown an entire neighborhood, not in water, but in syrup. And you? You'll be there, right in the thick of it. You might think of molasses as something harmless, sweet, innocent. Maybe you picture it drizzled on cornbread or baked into gingerbread. But back in the early years of the 20th century, molasses wasn't just a pantry staple, it was a multi-million-dollar beast that oozed its way into nearly every part of American industry. And you? You're about to follow the money. Molasses begins its journey thousands of miles away in the Caribbean, where sugarcane is harvested and boiled into thick, black syrup under a relentless tropical sun. From there, it travels by steamship, sloshing in steel drums across the Atlantic to the icy docks of Boston. You watch the barrels get hauled by cranes, stacked high, and rolled across frozen planks. Longshoremen grunt under their weight. Every gallon counts, every gallon pays. Once it arrives, it's stored in the Purity Distilling Company's massive tank on Commercial Street, an iron leviathan looming over the North End. It belongs to United States Industrial Alcohol, a powerful company with deep pockets and shallow patience. They built the tank in a hurry, no blueprints filed, no proper inspection. Just rivets, ambition, and a race against wartime demand. Why the rush? Because war eats fuel, and molasses can be fermented into ethanol, a key ingredient in military-grade explosives. That's right, you're not just dealing with sticky buns and rum. You're looking at a strategic resource. The very same syrup that trickles over pancakes is also being converted into weaponized firepower. You overhear two company men talking in a smoke-filled office. One slaps a ledger, the numbers underlined in red. They're making a fortune. Profits are high. Safety complaints? Shrugged off. A proper tank would have cost more. A better one would have taken longer to build. So what if the seams groan or the welds sweat molasses every time the temperature rises? You walk through the company's administrative wing, and it smells like polish and ego. They've got lawyers on standby, inspectors in their pocket. And when the residents of the North End start to complain about the groaning noises, the sticky drips, the occasional booming echo, they send out one engineer. One. He taps the tank, listens for hollow spots, and leaves. Later, he confesses the tank leaked so badly it should have never been filled. But the report vanishes into a desk drawer somewhere, buried under invoices and wartime contracts. Back on the street, you meet a man named Tony. He's a dock worker, father of 5, and he lives just 1 block from the tank. He shrugs when you bring up the leaks. "What can you do?" he says. They own everything. You watch him go home to his tiny apartment with walls thin enough to hear the neighbors sneeze. He's tired. His wife is making stew, and the children are fighting over a hand-me-down toy. You glance out his kitchen window. The tank looms in the dusk, blotting out the moon like a metal eclipse. Tony isn't the only one who feels powerless. This neighborhood is full of immigrants, Italians, Irish, Jews, people who don't speak English well, who work hard and don't complain. That's why Purity built the tank here. It was easier, cheaper, safer for the company. For you, though? For the people who live in the shadow of that syrup-filled monstrosity? It's a gamble. A slow-loading gun aimed at their homes, waiting for a hairline fracture to become a death sentence. And then, as if fate were twisting the knife, the company overfills the tank. Just before the disaster, they top it off with a fresh shipment of warm molasses from the Caribbean. Warm syrup in a freezing Boston winter. You do the math. As it cools, it contracts, creating internal pressure. Fermentation builds gas. Gas builds pressure. Pressure pushes against walls not designed to hold it. You walk past the tank again on January 14th. It's night. You swear the steel looks bloated. The seams are sweating. It lets out a low moan, long and drawn out like a wounded animal. You aren't an engineer, but even you can tell this isn't right. And somewhere in a Purity office, someone signs off on another shipment. More molasses. More risk. More money. You lie awake that night in your drafty apartment, wondering if the scent of molasses is getting stronger. The wind rattles the windows. Something creaks in the distance. You roll over and pull the blanket tighter. You have no idea that by this time tomorrow, the air will be filled with screams, not sweetness. You wake up to frost on the windows and the usual din of Boston's North End coming to life. The year is 1919, but today doesn't feel like just any other morning. There's a hush, a certain heaviness to the cold that settles deep into your chest. You step out onto the street, and there it is again, that massive steel cylinder rising like a mechanical colossus above the tenements. You've seen it every day, passed it on the way to work, to the butcher, to the pub. But today, you stop. You really look. The tank towers 5 stories above you. From the base, it feels like standing beneath a water tower, only this one's squatting in the middle of your neighborhood, not out in some distant field. Its color is a dull gray, darkened by streaks of rust and lines of syrup that have dried into hardened trails. If you listen closely, and you do, now you can hear it. A slow, irregular rhythm. Creak, pop, groan. The kind of sound an old wooden ship might make as it strains against stormy seas. Only there's no water here. Just steel and molasses. The tank holds over 2 million gallons of it. You try to picture that much syrup, but your brain can't quite grasp it. Imagine an Olympic swimming pool filled with tar. Now double it. Then make it climb up, pressing outward, every inch begging to break free. You watch a boy dart past you and slap the side of the tank with his glove, laughing. He runs off, licking his fingers. A thin trickle of molasses oozes from a rivet and clings to the metal like a spider's thread. He doesn't know that syrup's not supposed to come out of there. No one told him the tank wasn't tested, that it was rushed into use to meet demand during the war, that it was painted brown not for beauty, but to hide the leaks. You know now, and that knowledge sits like a stone in your gut. Inside the tank, the pressure is building. The warm molasses from the Caribbean is cooling in the Boston cold, shrinking and fermenting. Gases form, bubbles expand. The steel plates flex, held together by rivets that were never rated for this kind of strain. You walk around the tank slowly, your boots crunching in the snow. You count the seams that bulge slightly, the dark trails of molasses that glisten in the low sun. You remember reading that the tank was tested by filling it with water once, and even then, it leaked. The company painted over it, filled it with syrup anyway, shrugged when neighbors complained. "It's fine," they said. "You're not so sure anymore." You hear voices nearby, 2 workers from the firehouse talking in hushed tones. One says he heard the tank shudder in the middle of the night. The other says he saw pigeons flying off in a panic just after dawn. Like they knew something, he mutters. But what is there to know? This is Boston. It's cold. It's winter. Tanks creak. Pigeons flap. People move on. Still, you linger. You picture what's inside. Layer upon layer of dark syrup pressing outward. The gas inside pushing upward like a living thing. If the tank were to fail just for a moment, you wonder what would happen. Would it drip slowly? Crack down the middle like a split log? Or would it erupt? You can't shake the feeling that this tank is no longer holding molasses. It's holding back catastrophe. And as you step away, you place your hand on the cold steel. Just for a second. Just to feel it. It's vibrating. Only slightly, but enough to send a chill up your spine that has nothing to do with the weather. You turn and walk back toward home, faster than before. The air is too quiet. The sky too still. The scent of molasses, normally comfortingis, now a warning, clinging to your coat like smoke before a fire. And up above, pigeons take flight again. This time, they don't come back. You know how sometimes the world whispers before it screams? That's what it was like in Boston's North End, the days before the flood. The city gave hints, subtle ones, but you had to be listening. And nobody was. Not the men in suits. Not the engineers who signed off without measuring the metal. Not even the city inspectors who never stepped foot near the tank once it was built. They all looked the other way, or worse than ever, looked at all. But you were there. And looking back now, you can't believe how loud the warning signs actually were. It started small. Drips, mostly. Thin streams of molasses trickling from the rivets. You saw them. Everyone did. Children collected the syrup in little tin pails, not knowing it meant the tank was crying for help. Leaks weren't just tolerated, they were expected. And when people asked why a tank built to hold millions of gallons was sweating from its seams, the company shrugged. Then came the noises. If you walked past the tank on a quiet day, you could hear it breathe. Not literally, but it felt that way. Creaks, groans, occasional metallic pops like distant musket fire. An old man said it reminded him of a ship dying at sea. Others joked that the tank had indigestion, but behind the jokes was a thread of unease. You could see it in the glances neighbours gave one another when the groans got louder, the silences that followed the booms. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it. That thing isn't right. One woman, Mrs. Donatelli, from the corner apartment told her landlord the tank shook her windows. He told her to buy heavier curtains. Tony, your dock worker friend, said his boots stuck to molasses on the sidewalk every morning. Must be leaking from somewhere, he said, frowning up at the massive wall of steel beside his building. Ain't normal. But he didn't report it. Who would he report it to? The same men who'd built it with no permits, no plans, no conscience? The city wasn't much help either. You remember reading in the paper that the company had bypassed local building codes by claiming the tank was temporary. Temporary. As if a 5-story behemoth holding millions of gallons of fermenting syrup was just passing through. A few months before the flood, the tank nearly gave out. A deep groaning noise startled people all the way down on Atlantic Avenue. Some said it sounded like thunder, others like a whale's death cry. When neighbours complained, Purity's response was swift, but not in the way you'd hope. They didn't drain the tank. They didn't reinforce the rivets. They painted it brown to hide the leaks. You stare at the streaks on the surface now, visible even through the slapdash paint job, like blood bleeding through a bandage. You run your finger over one and feel how sticky it still is, even in the freezing cold. The syrup is never fully frozen, always warm enough to weep. And still, no one takes action. You pass by the firehouse and hear a firefighter, Tommy, who lives 3 blocks away, telling someone that last night the tank made a noise like it was cracking open. Like it sighed, he says, like it was tired, but no calls are made. No streets blocked, no alerts issued, because that's the thing with slow disasters. They don't wear sirens or flash red lights. They creep, they warn, and then they strike, when you've convinced yourself the danger was never real to begin with. The night before the flood, there's a pressure shift. The molasses inside is restless fermenting, gassing, swelling. The cold air outside doesn't help. It seals the steel like a lid on a boiling pot. The tension inside the tank builds in silence. Somewhere around midnight, a loud bang startles a few people awake. One man swears he heard a metallic snap, like a branch breaking in a storm, but it's cold. He pulls the blanket tighter, tells himself it was nothing, and drifts back to sleep. And so the signs were ignored. All of them. The leaks, the groans, the pops, the creaks, the syrup on the sidewalk, the smell thickening in the air, the pigeons leaving. It was all there, but nobody listened, until the tank stopped whispering and finally screamed. It's morning. January 15th, 1919. The kind of winter day that fools you into thinking it might be warm. The sun glints off patches of melting snow. The air smells sweeter than usual, thicker. Somehow, and you don't know why, but something in your chest tightens when you breathe it in. You step outside, your boots crunching over a patch of ice that never quite melts in the alley. The city stirs around you like it always does. Horses clop down cobbled streets, their breath rising in little white puffs. Streetcars rattle. A few schoolboys throw snowballs at one another, shrieking with laughter as they duck behind wooden barrels. Nothing seems out of place. You turn toward the harbour, toward that hulking tank on Commercial Street. It looks the same as always, but different. Maybe it's the way the sunlight catches on its seams. Maybe it's how still it seems to still. The pigeons are gone again. That bothers you more than you'd like to admit. You pass a bakery on the corner where the windows are fogged up from rising dough. The baker, Mr. Rec Calvi, is humming as he sets out a tray of rolls. Molasses in the air today, he says with a smile. Means a good bake. You nod, but your eyes keep drifting to the tank. You're not the only one. A man unloading barrels down the street pauses, adjusts his cap, and stares. He says nothing, but his hands move faster after that. You catch a glimpse of a worker from the distillery stepping out for a smoke. He looks pale, tired. You wonder if he's been working late, checking pressure levels, or maybe he just had a bad dream. You cross the street and pause for a moment, listening. The sounds of the city are alive. Dogs barking, someone shouting down the block, a bell ringing in a nearby shop. But underneath all of that, beneath the noise and the bustle, you swear you hear something else. A low hum. Not a mechanical one. Not a man-made thing. No, it's deeper. Faint. Like a giant exhaling underground. You brush the thought away. The mind plays tricks. You keep walking. Inside the nearby stable, horses stomp nervously. A stable boy swears one of them nearly kicked down the gate last night. He mutters something about animals sensing things humans can't. You chuckle politely, but you can't help glancing again toward the tank. There's a delivery cart parked too close to it. The horse tied to the front keeps shifting, snorting. Its ears pinned back. It keeps pulling at its reins like it wants to bolt. And the scent. It's different today. Still sweet, yes, but overwhelming. Like it's in your mouth, even when you're not breathing. The molasses smell is no longer coming from the factory, or the bakery, or the pails of syrup kids gather for fun. It's coming from the seams. You get closer now, close enough to touch the tank. You don't, but you think about it. You can see the rivets clearly, some with fresh syrup leaking from their edges. Not dried trails, not the usual amber crust. These leaks are wet, new, shining in the winter light. You glance up. Something about the top of the tank looks warped, slightly domed, where it used to be flat. Like the pressure inside is pushing upward. You take a step back, but then someone laughs across the street. A girl skips over a puddle, her scarf fluttering in the wind. A vendor shouts about fresh fish. The moment breaks. Life continues. The clock at engine 31 reads just past noon. You head off toward your own errands, the tank fading behind you but not out of your mind. Because something is coming. You feel it in your spine, in the way the air holds its breath. And if you turned around, if you stayed and watched just a few minutes longer, you would see the seams begin to tremble. The first rivet pop free like a bullet. The steel start to tear. And a tidal wave of molasses rise like a monster from the sea. But for now, the city moves on, blissfully unaware. It begins with a sound you can't quite place. Not at first. It's not an explosion, not the sharp crack of dynamite or the bark of a gunshot. It's deeper, slower, like the earth is groaning, stretching too far, too fast. Then it happens. A metallic scream rips through the air long, high, and unnatural. You spin around just in time to see it. The tank. It's not a tank anymore. It's something else now. A splitting, shrieking nightmare of steel and syrup and death. The seams have failed. The rivets, hundreds of them, have blown off with such force they slice through the air like bullets. Some strike buildings. Some hit people. Then, the side of the tank gives way. It doesn't crack. It tears. The sound is like the ripping of fabric, the size of a city block, and from the wound pours a monster. A wave of molasses, dark, thick, and 2 stories taller, erupts from the tank, like a beast loosed from a cage. It hits the ground with a sickening thud and keeps moving. 35 miles an hour, faster than any man can run, faster than a horse can gallop. And you're right there. Your legs move before your brain does. You turn and run. Behind you, the wave consumes everything. It hurls steel panels like leaves. It shatters wooden buildings into kindling. It lifts freight cars off their tracks and tosses them like toys. You hear screams. They're muffled, almost instantly swallowed by syrup. A man just ahead of you disappears into the wave. One moment he's running. The next, he's gone, as if the ground opened and took him. The sound is unbearable. It's not just the roar of the molasses. It's the wood snapping, the glass shattering, the groan of collapsing walls. And beneath all of it people, crying out, gurgling, begging. You slip. The syrup has reached your boots. It's cold, impossibly thick, and it clings to everything. You push forward, step by step, the suction fighting you with every movement. A child wails behind a smashed window. A horse lies crushed under debris, its eyes wide with panic as it thrashes. You don't look back. You can't. Your heart pounds as you force yourself forward, trying to escape the wave of darkness. Behind you, entire buildings vanish. A firehouse engine 31's ripped from its foundation and flung sideways like a dollhouse. Firefighters inside are tossed against walls. One man is pinned beneath a beam and drowns before anyone can reach him. The molasses doesn't stop. It keeps flowing. It floods streets, alleys, cellars. It bursts through doors and windows and eats entire homes from the inside out. People are knocked off their feet and can't get up. The syrup grabs them by the ankles, the waist, the throat and holds them. You reach higher ground barely. You turn and see what's left of the neighborhood. It looks like a battlefield. Nothing stands upright. Everything is coated in molasses. Walls slump inward, warped by the pressure. Windows are gone. People scream from rooftops, waving for help. But there's no one coming. Not yet. The disaster took less than 60 seconds. 1 minute, it was just another winter day. The next, the north end was gone. You stare at the destruction, unable to speak. Your breath clouds the air. You're shaking partly from the cold, mostly from the shock. The smell is overwhelming now. Not sweet, not anymore. It's suffocating. And the silence that follows? That's the worst part. It doesn't last long, but it stretches, thick and unnatural, like the molasses itself. Then come the cries, the moans, the pleas. That's when you realize you survived, but many didn't. And you're standing in the middle of one of the most bizarre and horrifying disasters in American history. And it's only just begun. You thought the wave was the worst of it. But now comes the silence. And then the sounds. They're not sharp, not loud. They're soft, wet, gurgling. You hear moans that barely rise above a whisper, the kind that make your skin crawl because you can't tell exactly where they're coming from. Somewhere beneath the surface, someone is crying for help. And it hits you. They're still alive. Some of them, trapped. You step forward, slowly. The molasses is everywhere now, 3 feet deep in some places, and thicker than wet cement. Every step is a battle. Your boots are useless, so you ditch them, and your socks instantly cling to the goo like it's trying to eat you. It's cold. Not just the air, but the molasses. It's freezing your feet, sucking the warmth from your bones. All around you, the north end has been buried in syrup. A man is stuck near what used to be a loading dock. He's on his knees, screaming through a mouth full of molasses. You rush to him, but he's covered. Only his face and one shoulder are visible. You reach out, try to pull, but the syrup fights back. He's glued in place. It's hardening, he coughs. He's right. The wave that was once fluid is already turning, sluggish, slower, thicker, like cooling lava. You dig with your hands, tearing at the syrup, but it's like trying to claw through tar. Behind you, another voice calls out, a woman this time, somewhere out of view, screaming for her child. You freeze. Where is she? You scan the ruined landscape. All you see are pieces of what used to be buildings, carriages, fences all scattered and flattened like toys beneath a boot. And then you hear the child. High-pitched, desperate. You turn toward the sound. It's coming from beneath a pile of debris planks and shards of glass caked in syrup. You crawl toward it, your hands numb, your clothes soaked. Every move makes a loud squelch. You reach the pile, begin ripping pieces away. Underneath is a boy. maybe 8 years old. He's smeared in molasses, crying but alive. You pull him free. He clutches your coat with both hands and sobs so hard he can't breathe. You hold him. You don't even realize you're crying too. Farther down the street, a horse is thrashing its legs, trapped beneath a broken cart, its body almost fully submerged. It kicks, screams. You turn away before the sound stops. Not all the dead go quietly. One man is found standing, frozen in place, eyes wide open. At first you think he's alive. You call out. No answer. You get closer, and you understand he drowned on his feet. The molasses pinned him upright, held him like a statue. His skin shines darkly under the winter sun. You stumble backward. More bodies are uncovered. A fireman, a little girl, a delivery man crushed beneath a barrel. Most are nearly unrecognizable. It's not just the syrupy what it did to them. Some were thrown. Some were flattened. Some were held under until their lungs filled with thick, cold sugar. You hear someone say, "It's like quicksand made of death." They're not wrong. And still, it gets worse. The people who survived the wave now have to survive the aftermath. Hypothermia sets in fast. The molasses draws heat from skin like a hungry thing. Rescue workers arrive in small numbers, wading into the sludge. They use ropes, shovels, even axes to break through walls of syrup. They wrap survivors in blankets that quickly soak through. Some don't make it through the night. And then, as the sun begins to set, something unexpected happens. The smell changes. It's not sweet anymore. It's sour. A sickly fermentation that seeps into your nose and makes your stomach turn. The syrup is alive, rotting, breeding bacteria in the cold, thick air. You cover your mouth with a rag, but it doesn't help. You want to go home, but where is that now? The buildings are gone. The streets are rivers of sugar and splinters. People wander like ghosts, looking for loved ones, for shoes, for anything that still makes sense. You stand there as night falls, covered in molasses, cold to your bones, surrounded by death. And you realize this wasn't a freak accident. It was a slow-moving massacre, one no one saw coming, even though it had been screaming for help all along. You wake to a strange silence, broken only by the occasional cough or groan. The world around you is coated in a thick, dark glaze. The North End is barely recognizable more, a twisted sculpture of destruction than a neighborhood. The smell of molasses hangs heavy, and every breath tastes sweet and sour at once. But you're alive. You're one of the lucky ones. Around you, others stir. Some are wrapped in blankets. Others sit shivering, soaked in syrup, eyes wide with disbelief. The shock has set in. Bodies ache, lungs burn from inhaling the sticky air, but survival instinct claws at them. You spot Tony, the dockworker friend from before. His coat is torn, his hands raw from trying to pull neighbors free. He's panting hard, but his eyes are sharp. "We need to help them," he says. You nod, knowing there's no time to waste. Rescue isn't just physical, it's emotional. People clutch loved ones who didn't survive. Mothers sob quietly for children lost. Fathers stare blankly, numb. And yet, amid the despair, there's resilience. You follow a group trying to clear a path through the molasses. Their boots sink deep, pulling at the syrup like quicksand. They move carefully, using poles and planks to balance. Every step feels like wading through a nightmare that won't end. A young nurse named Mary arrives, wrapped in a thick wool coat. She has no formal training, but instinct drives her. She carries a box of bandages and makeshift splints, tending to the injured with trembling hands. You watch as she cleans a boy's face, gently wiping molasses away to reveal bruises and cuts. Her voice is soft, reassuring, like a lifeline. Some survivors are lucky enough to be pulled from the worst of it. Others are stuck, trapped beneath rubble or glued in place by syrup hardened like cement. You help pull an elderly man free, his breath shallow and eyes glassy. You wonder how many more are still out there, muffled beneath the sticky sludge. The cold bites deeper as hours pass. The molasses, thick and unyielding, draws heat from bodies faster than the frigid January air. Hypothermia looms. People huddle close, sharing body warmth, whispering prayers, sharing stories to keep hope alive. Word spreads of the firemen and sailors who braved the sticky flood to save others. You hear about a crew wading waist-deep, breaking windows, dragging children and elders to safety. Their heroes not wearing capes but stained with brown syrup, faces grim but determined. You yourself feel exhaustion settling in, but you push it aside. There's no room for weakness. Not now. Families gather in makeshift shelters, church basements, community halls, places that escaped the flood's wrath. There, the wounded receive what care the city can offer, though hospitals are overwhelmed and supplies scarce. You hear whispered rumors of the company's indifference, of how warnings were ignored, how the tank was rushed into use without proper testing. Anger simmers beneath grief, but it will take time to boil over. For now, survival is the only thing that matters. As night falls again, the molasses begins to congeal even more. The cold and the darkness deepen the sense of isolation. You feel the weight of the disaster pressing down not just on the city, but on every soul left to pick up the pieces. You wonder, how does a community rebuild when it's been drowned in sweetness turned deadly? And what happens when the world outside doesn't even know? You stand on the edge of the disaster zone, watching chaos unfold. Molasses, coats, everything, buildings, streets, even the air itself feels thick enough to choke on. Yet amid this sticky nightmare, something remarkable happens. People refuse to give up. The firemen from Engine 31 are the first to arrive, even though their station was nearly demolished by the wave. Covered head to toe in dark syrup, they move with determination that borders on desperation. Their heavy boots sink deep into the molasses as they wade through the streets, shouting orders, carrying stretchers and dragging survivors from the ooze. You watch as they work together to pull a woman trapped beneath a fallen timber. Their hands, slick and numb, find purchase where they can. One firefighter shouts for a ladder, another uses an axe to pry loose the debris. Finally, with a grunt and a heave, they free her, bruised but alive. But the firemen aren't alone. Sailors from the nearby Coast Guard base arrive, bringing ropes, boats, and tools. They push through waist-deep molasses, cutting through wreckage, rescuing those too weak to move. You see a group of them carry an elderly man, his clothes soaked and stiff with syrup, to higher ground. Their faces are grim but resolute, their breath visible in the cold air. Neighbors pitch in too, armed with shovels, buckets, and whatever they can find. Some dig through debris, others form human chains to pass survivors along. You hear calls of encouragement and prayers whispered under breath. One nurse, Mary, who arrived earlier, organizes a triage area in a nearby church basement. She moves quickly, tending to wounds with whatever supplies she can muster, cleaning faces caked in molasses, and soothing frightened children. Her courage lifts the spirits of those around her. You feel the weight of the moment. This isn't just a rescue. It's a fight for life against an enemy no one expected. Syrup that clings, suffocates, and slows time itself. Despite exhaustion, the rescuers push on through the night. Fingers raw, backs aching, lungs burning from the cold air and thick smell. Every saved life is a victory. Every loss a wound on the city's heart. You remember hearing about how the molasses' unusual density made even simple tasks impossible. Swimming was useless. You couldn't float. Running was a struggle against invisible hands pulling you under. The syrup swallowed sound too, muffling cries for help, making it harder to locate those trapped. Yet, through it all, these heroes kept going. They battled the cold, the stickiness, the despair, and they saved hundreds. As dawn breaks, you watch the rescuers finally begin to rest. Bodies lean against walls, covered in sticky layers, eyes glassy with fatigue. But even in their weariness, you see pride. Because they did the impossible. They faced a flood of syrup and won. The sun rises over a city transformed. Where streets once hummed with life, now a thick, dark glaze covers everything like an unyielding skin. Boston's North End looks less like a neighborhood and more like the aftermath of a sugar-coated apocalypse. You step carefully through the molasses-coated streets. Each step squelches and pulls, threatening to trap you. The air is heavy, sweet and sour, clinging to your throat and lungs. The bitter scent lingers, a constant reminder that this disaster isn't over. The cleanup has begun, but it's unlike anything you've ever imagined. Molasses doesn't just wash away with water. It sticks. It clings. It refuses to let go. Workers armed with shovels, brooms, and buckets start the slow, painstaking process. They scrape molasses from sidewalks, dump it into carts, and haul it away. Streets are flooded with salt water, hot water, and steam jets, but the syrup resists all attempts to be tamed. Homes and businesses are ruined. Furniture soaked and ruined. Floors warped. Walls sticky to the touch. You peek inside a bakery and see ovens still warm, flour dusted over syrup-streaked counters. The owner stares at the mess, silent. Neighbors gather in small groups, sharing stories of loss and survival. The mood is grim, but you notice determination beneath the sorrow. They know the city must rebuild. You watch as officials arrive, promising aid, inspecting damage. But their voices are drowned out by the hum of workers and the soft plopping of molasses into barrels. For weeks, the cleanup drags on. The syrup hardens overnight, turning to a brittle shell that cracks underfoot. Rats and pests feast on the sugar-rich environment. The smell festers, driving some residents away. Children play cautiously, dipping their fingers in the puddles that remain. But the danger lingers. Beneath the surface, pockets of syrup hide sharp debris and unstable ground. Yet, despite the mess, life continues. Shops reopen, markets buzz, and the city tries to return to normal. The molasses disaster becomes a story whispered over kitchen tables and street corners, a dark chapter in Boston's history. And as you look around, you realize this flood changed more than streets. It changed the city's soul. Boston was sticky now, not just with syrup, but with memory. After the molasses settled and the city began its long cleanup, something else started to rise: anger. The people of Boston, battered but unbroken, refused to let the disaster fade into silence. They demanded answers. They wanted accountability. You walk into a crowded courtroom. The air is thick, not with syrup this time, but with tension. Lawyers shuffle papers. Journalists whisper. Families clutch photographs of loved ones lost or injured. The Purity Distilling Company is in the hot seat. The massive corporation tries to downplay its role, calling the disaster a tragic accident. But the evidence stacks up like the molasses itself, overwhelming and sticky. Engineers testify that the tank was poorly constructed, filled too quickly, and never properly tested. Whistleblowers reveal internal memos showing the company knew about the leaks but ignored them to save money and meet wartime production quotas. You watch as survivors recount their stories, voices trembling, faces pale but determined. They speak of ignored warnings, groaning tanks, and the terrifying flood that took everything. The case drags on for months, but the message is clear. Negligence cost lives. In the end, the court orders Purity to pay damages to hundreds of victims and families. It's one of the first major corporate liability cases in the United States, but the impact goes beyond money. New laws are drafted, emphasizing stricter building codes, safety inspections, and corporate responsibility. The disaster becomes a turning point, reshaping how America handles industrial safety. You realize this isn't just about molasses or Boston. It's about holding power accountable, about ensuring that no one's home becomes a death trap for profit. And while the scars of the flood remain, the lawsuit plants a cedar promise that the mistakes of the past will not be repeated. You walk the streets of Boston today, and the towering tank is long gone, but the story isn't forgotten. The Great Molasses Flood remains etched in the city's memory, a bizarre tragedy that sounds almost too strange to be true. Monuments stand to honor those who lost their lives, and plaques remind visitors of the disaster's impact. Yet the story takes on a life beyond memorials. It becomes a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed, negligence, and ignoring the quiet warnings before catastrophe. You hear it in whispered urban legends, in school lessons, and in the laughter of children who dare each other to touch the cold, molasses-stained stones. It's a story that's been retold in books, documentaries, and even songs, each version adding layers of meaning and mystery. Local historians debate details, uncovering new facts, piecing together what happened on that cold January day. The flood even inspires artists and writers who see in it a metaphor for how something sweet can turn deadly. But for the people of Boston, especially the descendants of those who lived through it, the flood is more than history. It's a reminder of resilience of a community that faced disaster head-on and refused to be drowned by it. You might think molasses is just a sticky kitchen ingredient, but for Boston, it's a symbol of bittersweet legacy that continues to ripple through time. And the next time you taste that thick syrup on your pancakes or gingerbread, remember, beneath its sweetness lies a story of warning, tragedy, and hope. You might wonder, how could something as simple as molasses cause such a deadly flood? It's not just about syrup spilling over. It's physics, chemistry, and a perfect storm of conditions all coming together. Molasses isn't like water. It's dense, about 1.5 times heavier. When it spills, it moves slower, but it's far more powerful. Imagine trying to run through cold on every step is met with resistance, pulling you back. That's what made the flood so deadly. The tank itself was a ticking time bomb. The steel was too thin, the rivets too few and weak. It was designed for water, not the thick, sticky molasses. When warm molasses from the Caribbean filled the tank, it expanded as it cooled, increasing internal pressure beyond what the tank could handle. Then there's fermentation. The sugars in molasses naturally ferment, producing carbon dioxide gas. Inside the sealed tank, this gas built up pressure, pushing against the walls like an invisible force. Add Boston's cold, winter, air-freezing temperatures caused the steel to become brittle, making it more likely to crack. All these factors combined until the tank couldn't hold any longer. When it ruptured, the pressurized molasses burst out with tremendous force, creating a wave that barreled through the streets. Scientists today study this event to understand fluid dynamics in viscous materials and structural engineering failures. It's a case study in how seemingly small oversights like ignoring safety codes or underestimating material stress can lead to catastrophic failure. So next time you pour molasses on your breakfast, remember, that dark syrup once powered a disaster rooted in science, greed, and miscalculation. You stroll through Boston today, walking streets that have been rebuilt, buildings that have been restored, and neighborhoods that have moved on. But the Great Molasses Flood left a mark deeper than the scars on the brick and mortar. After the disaster, the city didn't just clean up the mess, it reinvented itself. Building codes became stricter, safety inspections mandatory. The government began taking industrial regulations seriously, realizing that unchecked corporate greed could destroy lives and livelihoods. Communities grew closer, bound by shared trauma and determination. The flood became a story passed down through generations, a reminder of vulnerability, but also of resilience. Economic changes rippled through the city. Purity Distilling Company's reputation was shattered, and businesses began to prioritize safety over shortcuts. New industries emerged, fueled by lessons learned. The disaster also inspired innovation. Engineers and scientists studied the failure, leading to advances in tank construction and materials science. Boston became a leader in safety standards, a city that refused to let tragedy define its future without change. You notice how the story has seeped into Boston's culture, influencing everything from literature to art and even tourism. The molasses flood is bizarre enough to capture imaginations, but its lessons are serious and lasting. And as you pass the spot where the tank once stood, now marked by a simple plaque, you feel the weight of history and hope. Because Boston survived, Boston learned, and Boston changed. You might think a disaster like the Great Molasses Flood belongs to the past, an odd, tragic footnote in history. But its lessons echo loudly into the present and beyond. It's a reminder that safety can never be an afterthought, that the smallest cracks, literal or metaphorical, can lead to devastating collapse. When companies prioritize profits over people, the results can be deadly. You think about the warnings ignored in Boston, the leaks, the creaks, the complaints. How often do we see similar stories today? Buildings unsafe, shortcuts taken, risks hidden beneath the surface until it's too late. And yet, there's hope. Because after tragedy, communities rise. Laws change. Awareness grows. People remember. The Great Molasses Flood teaches us to listen to the quiet warnings, to the signs that something is wrong before disaster strikes. It's about vigilance, responsibility, and the power of collective action. Next time you pour molasses onto your breakfast or hear the story, think beyond the sweetness. Remember the lives lost, the heroism shown, and the city that refused to drown. Because history isn't just about what happened. It's about what we choose to learn and what we do next.